Module 14 is admittedly a bit of a catch-all. Since we've kind of modularized each section about Astro, I haven't always touched on all the little smaller features of Astro, and that's what I want to do in this module. We'll talk about installing themes, different config or CLI options, the dev toolbar, and anything else that I feel like fits into this kind of category of things that you should probably know about Astro, even if they haven't fit in any of the other modules. So we're going to start first of all in this video with installing different themes. Now I briefly talked about this in the intro, but you can come over to resources and click on themes, and you can install any of the themes here immediately. Now obviously some of them you have to pay for, but we'll first of all talk about just kind of the default expectation when it comes to working with Astro's CLI. You've seen multiple times in this course that if you do npm or pnpm or yarn create Astro at latest and then give it a name, it will create a new folder for you. In fact, you'll see Houston pop up and walk you through the entire process where it has you select each individual option. Now, you can actually kill this. Let's go ahead and do that with Control and C, and then let's redo this. And I want to add a couple of flags to this. So if I come over here and do double dash, it allows me to pass extra flags here. First of all, I can pass yes, which will just answer with the default options in the entire wizard. Secondly, if you want to skip Houston, you can do skip Houston like this. Poor buddy. All right, he's gone now. You don't have to use him. And then you can actually apply a template immediately if you'd like to. So template, and then you've got a few options here. You've got basics, and you've got minimal, and I think you've got blog. I think those are the three options you have in the config, and you can select them right here. So I'll do something like minimal, and then obviously you can name it right here as well. So if we do this, you'll notice it skips everything and just starts to install it straight away. Now I'm going to go ahead and kill this because I don't want it to install everything. Okay, so that's kind of how to work with the basic CLI interaction when it comes to creating a new project. You can, however, also install any of these templates, and that's what I want to talk about next. So in addition to those default ones, you can come over here and select something you might want to install and install here. So let's go ahead and come over here, and let me go ahead and make sure I'm selecting just free ones for now, and we'll view the results. And if I come over here, let's grab this one by Alien on the Astro core team. Now with any of these themes, I can use the CLI command and just pass it the actual GitHub repo, and it will download this for me automatically. You can see that right here, he's got this right here. You can see he actually shows how to do this right here, and I'm using npm for now. So you'll do npx, create Astro at latest. I think this still works with npm as well. You pass the double dash flags, which is required in npm 7+. Then you provide the template, and then the name of the repo. You'll notice this right here is just the end of the URL on the GitHub repo. So that means if I come back over this way, I can add it just like this. Now you can actually also provide a name if you want to off the end of this, but I'm going to leave it just like that. And let me clear that out because obviously it didn't work. I think maybe you do have to do npm, and he just had it wrong in his own docs. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so you can actually walk through this as well. Now here you still get asked a lot of these questions about TypeScript, installing dependencies. I won't do that. No, I won't initialize new Git repository, and it will just copy that template and get it up for you. So let me go ahead and cd into this, and then we'll just npm I and npm run dev and get this up and running just so you can see it out of the box. Okay, just like that, we should be running this community theme. Let me open this up at localhost 4321. And here we go. We get this nice brutalist theme aesthetic, and everything is set and ready to go. Now, through this course, hopefully you've learned how to customize Astro, but it may be that you want to start with one of these themes, and there's a lot of people who have done a ton of work to make these really easy to work with, and then you can just customize it as you want. In the next video, we're going to look at the details of some Astro config options. In this video, I want to go over several of the configuration options available in your Astro config file. Now, we've touched on a couple of these occasionally, but some of these are very powerful if you need to do something very specific. So let's talk through a few of these that I want to mention. Number one, you can mention the site, and this will be used, for instance, in integrations like the sitemap, which will use whatever your base site is, whatever your final URL is, to build the sitemap. Now that's as easy as coming inside the config and just adding it like this. Now, some of the templates will include this by default because it's necessary for things like the sitemap integration once again. Now, sometimes you're not building your site at the root of whatever your domain happens to be. I think I only have one site like this currently that I'm still using like classic FTP on, but you can see that sometimes you might have like a subdirectory, and that's really where the index of your site works. Now notice that if you do this, all your static asset imports and URLs should add the base as a prefix. So rather than just having like /image, whatever your image happens to be, you want to have the docs or whatever your base happens to be. So let's come over here and we'll say something like the base is new, for instance. So let's say we were using this as some kind of like staging URL where everything was underneath this subdirectory. Now a lot of times you'll use a subdomain for this instead, but that would be one use case for this. you'll see that right here, they do talk about one other option, and this is something I wanted to bring up, which is this trailing slash. Depending on where you're hosting, sometimes these are required or sometimes they cannot be there. All right, so you can actually set a trailing slash to never, or you can set it to always as well, or you can actually set it to ignore down here, which will just match the URLs regardless of whether the trailing slash exists. So this can be especially helpful, like I said, if your specific build requires it or denies it, but it can also just be like if you want to make sure that in development, you are always working with what it will look like. If you want to be more strict with yourself, I think is the way they say here, you can set it to something like always. So let's come over here and maybe we'll have it underneath new like this, and we'll set the trailing slash to never. Now, if I come back over this way and we kill this and do npm run build, it will actually build with our configuration. And I'm going to jump back over this way and we're going to look at the final build. So here it is in the dist folder right here. And if I open this up, you'll see obviously it's a very basic site. It's just got this compressed HTML, which is another setting you can adjust if you don't want it to be compressed. I'm going to save it so that it reformats it using Prettier. And notice here, I did not add that trailing slash or the meta URL thing to this favicon. So if I were to serve this, which you can do with another command, if I jump over here, we'll do npm run preview. This will serve static sites. It doesn't work with SSR sites, but this is just a static site. So if I come over here and try to do it here, you'll notice it says, hey, you have to actually do this at the new path. So I'll go ahead and do that. And look, the favicon is broken. In fact, if I look at the dev tools and refresh, I think I've got that hidden actually because it's annoying sometimes, but it's no longer working. If I manually come in here and I change it to our new, and I manually refresh, you'll see now it actually does come in. So this is what they mean by making sure that if you have any static files, this would be stuff inside of your public directory, that you prefix it with your base. So let's close this off. And I want to show you with one other example as well. So let's come over here and kill this. And then I'll do npm run dev just to get this back up and running. And then let me go ahead and just take a screenshot of this. All right, we'll use this as a screenshot. We'll say a homepage or something. All right, and I'm going to drag this again into my public directory. So this is a static asset. And then let's come into the index. And right above here, let's reference this as an image. So a little awkward, but let's come inside here. I guess we'll do it. Let's do it right below the H1. For simplicity, let me just use the image tag where we'll point the SRC to my image, right? What do we call that? Like homepage.png probably, I think is what it was. We'll say the alt is like a screenshot. Okay, let me close this off and just make sure that that's what I actually called it. Homepage.png. Okay, so if I save it here, we should see this pop in. Now that's what you would think, but again, we're referencing this at /new. So I'd have to actually come in here and prefix this with new. And now it shows up, albeit way bigger than I actually want it to be. So you can either manually mark it like this, or again, you get a little helper here where you can use the import meta.env. So let me change this to a template string. We'll do import.meta.env.base URL. And that should work the exact same way, all right? This references new as well. Now, obviously, in this way, it's much easier just to type new, but maybe this is changing. So again, maybe you're using this as a staging URL, and it's easier to have this change in one place, and then you can just update this or remove this everywhere rather than searching for like a string of new. Now, let's also come in here and change it on our layout. So if I come into my layout and I come into my SVG right here, we're going to do the exact same thing. Now, in this case, I'm just going to extract it out up top here. So we'll call it like base equals import.meta.env. And we'll use the base URL. Now I should be able to come in here and just add this as well. So base and favicon. So let's come back over this way, kill this. We're going to do npm run build, and then let's go ahead and preview it right away, npm run preview. Again, the preview command will take your built files, your dist files, and show them to you just as they will appear on your finished site. So let's come back over this way, and I can refresh, and everything is there, including the favicon and our massive image of the code down below. Obviously, they don't have any CSS. It looks like to prevent this from being full width, but that's okay. Okay, so those are two configuration options I wanted to mention. Well, I guess we snuck a third one in there with the trailing slash as well. I should mention there's also a root configuration, and if I come over here, let's just jump down to the root. And by default, this is your current present working directory. But it may be that you have your Astro project or multiple different Astro projects in the same directory. If that's the case, you can actually run all your Astro commands from a different directory, a different subdirectory. So let's take this example of a staged site where you have your main Astro site, and then in a subdirectory, you have like /docs. That's where you're actually building out your new site. You might have two different dev commands, one for running your present site and one for running the one under the docs or the new subdirectory. Now, I think there's probably easier ways to do that, but just to note, you can adjust the root if you need to. Now, if I come down here, there's another thing you may be interested in, which is the public directory and the SRC directory. You can change these around if you want. They're just public, and this is SRC by default, so I don't know that you need to change those. But one thing you may want to do if you change around your actual base is you may want to change your output directory. For instance, if you're using an FTP client, you probably don't want this to build to dist because that's not what you're going to be dragging into your FTP client. So for me, I might want to change this to something like new. So I'll do out dir, and I'll just change this to new. Now, just to note that if you do this, you probably want to come to your get ignore and do the same thing over here. So I'm going to add new here as well, and that way it does not get tracked either. And then let's go ahead and run that command again. And I'll come back over this way. You'll now notice that I have a dist, and I also have a new, and it's not being tracked either, but it includes all the same files that my previous dist folder included. So now I can just drag this directly into my FTP client or wherever you want to host this, and you've got it named properly already. So typically the base and the out directory work together. All right, let me close that down, close a lot of these things down, and come back to my Astro config. Now, by default, when you're working inside of a layout or any kind of Astro file, and you don't have the isGlobal flag, your styles will be scoped to that particular element. So let me open up one like that. I think there's cards in here. Let's open this up. So these right here, this link card. And if I were to look at this, so let's come over here, and we'll refresh here. If I look at these cards, these are the actual cards, not the screenshot of the cards, you'll notice how these things are scoped. I've got a data attribute, data Astro CID, etc., etc. That's what scopes the CSS. And in fact, if I pull this over so you can actually see the CSS, you'll notice that this is how it's scoping it, right? Now, I can change that if I want to. So let's come over here, and we've got options for scoped strategies. So right down here, scoped style strategy. And the way it used to work is they used to use the where selector. Now, the where selector is super helpful because it doesn't increase the specificity. However, it's really easy to overwrite, and I'm wondering if that's why they changed it to use the attribute selector by default, although you can also set this to class. So if I were to come over here and I change this scoped style strategy right here, we'll change it back to the where selector. And I go ahead and I rebuild. Actually, let's just run the dev server. And I jump back over this way. Then let's select one of these things again. You'll notice it's now using a class that looks very similar, right? It's like a random string. If I pull this over, you'll notice here now it's using where, this is true, so where it has this class, and where there's a link inside of it that also has this class. So if you prefer that kind of method for scoping your CSS styles, you are welcome to do it. All right, just a couple of other things to point out, and then I'll encourage you to look through the rest of these if you want to. If I scroll down this way, you're going to see a bunch of different build format options. Now, depending on where you're building, your platform may take care of this for you, but if you need some more specialty needs, here is a really helpful place to look. By default, you'll note that on the build, it builds a directory. So if you have like a pages and about, it will build an about with an index like this. However, you may just prefer that it builds it directly like an HTML file at the root of your server. So if you have a special need or preference there, you can adjust this build format. Now, if you scroll down this way, notice that this does affect the Astro URL, so you'll need to take that into consideration and also think about the trailing slash option as well. All right, like I mentioned, there are a ton of other things to look at inside of here that you may be interested in. Everything from I18N to certain experimental flags that are current right now as of writing this, to markdown options, some of which we've looked at, to some of the image options, again, that we've looked at before. In the next video, we want to look at prefetching options right here. So we'll do that. But before I do that, I want to show you just briefly again how to update a project if you're working in Astro. Now, it will usually prompt you to tell you that a newer version of Astro is out, but you can manually run the command mpx or pmpx or whatever at Astro.js upgrade like this. And what this will do is check all of your Astro dependencies and make sure that they're all ready to be updated before you just go and YOLO update. Now, in this case, I'm on a brand new project, so we should be set to go, right? All right, in the next video, let's look at some of those prefetching link options. Let's talk about some prefetching options. Now, essentially what prefetching does is it prefetches links that users might click on or have hovered over, and you can set a lot of customization here. Now, by default, when you're using view transitions, it does this automatically because it's trying to provide the fastest page transitions possible. So it kind of prefetches those links so they're ready when you go to transition. You can also set it to true yourself. So I'm going to come over here and let's actually get rid of a lot of these things from the last lesson. Let's see. All these don't matter. All right, let's get rid of all this and let's just set the prefetch here to true. Now, in order to actually prefetch links, we need other links. And right now we're still using this one that has nothing in it. So let me come over here first of all, and let's just add a link. And this is just going to point to an about route like this, where we'll say about. And then let's copy this and paste it. And we'll call this about. Now let me close this down and we'll get rid of pretty much everything inside this main. So let's come into here and just replace the main. And we'll have a link that points to the home, and we'll say home. So now, if I did this correctly, I should be able to come over here. We got rid of our subdirectory, but right here, I should be able to go to About, and then back to Home, and our screenshot's not working, but that's all right. Okay, so now this is working properly, but if I open up the DevTools, and I come over here to the Network Requests, and let's just look at the fetch. If I come over here and I hover, by default, this is not going to do anything. So simply setting prefetch to true doesn't prefetch anything. You have to actually mark individual links. So I need to add this right here to a link. So let's come over here, and we'll just add this to the About link. Now, if I come back over this way and I start to hover, notice it actually prefetches it, right away. In fact, let's switch this to all, clear this out, and just like that. There you go. You see it actually loads the document. Now, if you want everything to be preloaded and you don't want to add this everywhere, you can add some configuration options that just constantly prefetch links. So let's jump back over this way. You'll notice you can set a prefetch all option instead, or a default strategy. So let's come back down here. We'll say prefetch all, set this all to true. So if I jump back over here, you can simply set this as an object instead, and we'll set the prefetch all to true. Now this enables it for all links, including those without that special attribute. Now once again, this is the default for view transitions. Otherwise, it's set to false. Now here you kind of have the opposite possibility, where if you do not want it to prefetch, you set this with the value to false. So let's come back over this way, and we'll clear all this out. And as soon as I hover over About, that should work. If I come over here, and we kill all this, and I hover over Home, it should do the same thing. However, if I do not want one of those things to be the case, I could come over here and set this value to false. So now if I come back home and we clear this out and I go to hover, it should no longer prefetch that link. So that's if you have it set to prefetch all by default. Now there are some more options here as well. You have a prefetched strategy default. Now you've got 4 different options. You can do it by tap. I guess this is if you want like microseconds of help, but you don't really want it to help. You can set it to hover, which is what it is by default. That is when you hover over the link, you saw that that's when it started to prefetch the page. You can do viewport when it fetches the link as soon as it enters the viewport, which in most cases will be right away, right? Or you can do prefetch all links on the page. Now, just like before, you can actually override this if you want to too on any particular link. So for now, let's get rid of this, and we'll just leave this blank right now, which should use our default if it doesn't have a value. And I'll come back over this way. We'll set our default strategy here. Let's set it to something like viewport. Now let's come over here. And if I start to come to this page and I refresh, it's already going to load the About page. So I don't have to hover to get it. It's already there. So let's refresh again, and I'll find it down here below. There it is, the About page right here. Now let's go ahead and move it further down the page. So we'll have this all the way maybe at the bottom somewhere. All right, how about right there? Okay, so there it is at the bottom of the page. If I refresh up here, you'll notice that it's not here. But if I scroll, and as soon as it gets in the page, it shows it right here. It's in the viewport. Now it will show. Now, if you always want it to prefetch, I can come over here again and change this to load. And if I come to the top of the page and reload, somewhere in here should be my About page. All right, there it is right here, right? So it's already prefetched this and it's ready to display it right away. Now, doing this is probably not a great idea. At most, you'd want to have something like a viewport, but probably what you want to do is leave it on hover, which is the default. So you can just get rid of this altogether, and you can override this with individual links. So let's come back over here. Remember, you just set the prefetch here. In this case, we could do something like viewport. All right, maybe this is a really big page that you want to load ahead of time. You want to make sure it's fast. And if I clear this out, you can see it's not in the viewport, but as soon as I get it in the viewport, now it will load this page. If you're loading a ton of documents, you can imagine how large this would be if you set it to default of load. But hopefully that makes sense and gives you some flexibility. Generally, I would leave it on hover if you want to prefetch links, and that way when people are about to go to a link, it's already working behind the scenes. It'll be extra fast when that transition happens. This video is all about different integrations that are available in Astro. I mostly want to show you how to get started rather than running individual ones. I do a lot of these for free on my channel, and we've used several of these integrations throughout this entire course. Let me come to integrations here under resources, and we can search and filter them however we want to. I'm going to start first of all with official integrations, and I'll click view results. You can see that these are a lot of the ones we've been using already. Now with any of these official integrations, you can simply use the npx or pmpx command and then add them directly using Astro. So once you've installed Astro on your project, you can just automatically add these and they will update your site. So let's add like Tailwind and React and MDX. Okay, so if I come back over this way, we can do npx astro add, and we'll do Tailwind and React. Let's do DB, let's do MDX, let's do an SSR adapter like a node. So we can add all these all together, and what it will do is take each of these and install the official extensions. So it first asks, can you install these things? Again, you've seen this a lot throughout the course. Now, depending on what you're installing, you may need to install additional files. Here you can see it's going to set up my Tailwind config for me automatically, which is great because I hate doing that. Here you can see for my database, it needs to create a config and a seed file. Yes, I'll say yes to that. And then look at this. It just updates my entire Astro config, shows me exactly what it's going to do. I'll say yes to that. It updates my TS config where necessary, like with React. I'll say yes, and then we're up and running. That means I can come over here with npm run dev, and all this is just operational. I jump back over this way and I reload. I can use Tailwind classes wherever I want because I've got Tailwind installed. I can use Astro DB wherever I want because I've got the database installed. So if I came over to my layout and I don't know, let's refresh this and make sure it's actually working. There we go. Let's say I came to my body and I said class name of hidden. So there we go. Obviously, you've seen this used multiple times throughout the course, but I just wanted to note again how to install the official integrations. Now, with non-official integrations, you can't do it quite that easily. It sometimes requires a little bit more manual work on your part. What I want to do is look at one that I've used a lot, which is Astro Icon, as an example of this. So right here, if I click on Astro Icon, you'll see that it does install it using the quick command, and I can add it just the exact same way. However, there's a little bit of difference. If I come over here, you might remember that because this is not an official integration, it actually throws up a little warning screen for me first. This is not an official integration. Are you sure you're cool with this? Yes, I am. Then it installs it, and it moves right along the way. So yes, yes to all those, and we're up and running. Now, not every unofficial integration has something quite as nice as this. So let me point out a couple of other ones that I enjoy, like Astro SEO. This one right here, you'll notice here they just have a manual install. It's just an npm package that gives you access to this Astro file, essentially. So there is no configuration where you need to add it to like an Astro config or anything like that, although there's a bunch of different options you can do here. So this is another way of installing a third-party package, a third-party integration. A couple of other nice ones that I like as well would be like robots.txt. This helps you provide the robots.txt file really simply. And here, once again, it's just going to install it. If you do the quick install, you can do npx astro add robots.tnt. And I don't know if they have to opt into this. I've only ever used this when they tell you to do it this way. Otherwise, you're manually adding it. And it should take care of everything, just like we saw with the Astro icon. It'll just require that you go through that scary question. All right. And then I come back over here. One other one I wanted to show you is Astro Font. This automatically optimizes your custom fonts and is really cool. I plan to do a video on my channel, and probably by the time you see this, it will be up. Now with this one, you just install it like any npm package, and then you can import it and pass it things like Google Fonts or local fonts or multiple fonts, and it will take care of all of it for you. And then finally, if you want to have some components out of the box, you can use this accessible Astro components. Now, obviously, if you're using something like React, you've got access to all the React libraries out there, or Svelte or Vue or whatever you happen to be using. So it doesn't have to be Astro specific to use it in Astro. And that's one of the reasons I love Astro. Obviously, you can also use plain HTML components as well that you can import from other places, but these are built especially with Astro in mind. So that's just a little bit more about integrations and directing you to a few integrations that I found especially helpful. Like I mentioned, I've done several videos on a lot of these on my channel, so you're welcome to check those out if you'd like to. Let's talk about the Dev Toolbar. I don't think we've mentioned this yet in the entire course, but you've got this little pop-up toolbar that you might find kind of annoying occasionally, but it can be really helpful if you know how to use it. And I'll even show you how to disable it or how to temporarily disable it if you don't want to use it in any particular time. Now, you notice you've got 4 buttons down here. We'll look at these in a second. But for instance, it gives you an audit where it says, hey, you should use the image component. Now, obviously, we've scoped this to the wrong section. But if I jump back over this way to, where was it? Right here, pages. And we scroll up to where it was used and we get rid of this, it should actually show us the image. But what if we did not have an alt? So let's get rid of this alt right here. And maybe just so I can not go insane, I'm going to set the max width here to 100%. Okay, there we go. Now, notice if I come down here, it now tells me, hey, this does not have an alt attribute. So I can come over here and add the alt here, even if it's nothing. Now it technically has it. Now, here it's telling me to use the image component, but that accessibility one is now gone. So essentially what this does is it gives you little tie-ins to things like accessibility or performance or whatever other plugins you install to make sure that your site is as performant as possible. Now let's come over to the docs where they'll talk you through a lot of this. You can see that you've got a number of useful tools automatically included, but you can extend it with more things like Dev Toolbar apps. We'll look at those in a second, but right now let's look at the built-in apps. You might remember there were 4 icons on the bottom. The first one is the Astro menu. In short, this gives you shorthand links to things you might need. So if I come over here, oops, I clicked on the wrong thing. If I come over here and click on this menu, you'll notice it gives you featured integrations. It allows you to click this to debug, and you can run this in your terminal. You can report a bug, do feedback, jump to documentation, or look at the community, which by the way is super helpful if you get stuck. I've asked tons of questions there myself. So essentially this is like a little quick link dashboard. If I come back over here to the docs, you'll notice you can also inspect islands, and that's really what it's for. Now I actually uninstalled the React component, so what we need to do is come over here and reinstall this Astro add, and we're going to do React. If I can spell React, and I quickly went through all those steps and we get this back up and running. Let's just come over here and let's create a component. We'll just call this like button.tsx. And then inside here, I'll scaffold out a quick button and maybe let's pass in a prop. We'll just call this title, and the title will be a type of string. And then just so we can actually use state here as well, let's say like, I don't know, count, set count, why not? We'll pull this from use state and I'll start this at 0. And here I'll just simply have the count showing here, count like this. And then below here, we'll have a button. And when someone clicks on it, we'll update this. So let's do an on click handler, or when it is clicked, we'll run the set count function to update things. So let's grab our previous value and then we'll simply do previous plus 1. And then finally, I guess we need our title on here somewhere as well. So let's wrap all this in a div. And then I'll also have my title here like this, whatever we pass in. So let's use this button component, which is weirdly named right here. And maybe I should just get rid of all the rest of this as well, just to keep it real simple. So let's do main. I'll pull in my button like that. And we need to provide a title, which I'll do here with like, I don't know, title. Okay, so that should have worked. If I come back over this way, here we go. I can increment it. Maybe. No, I can't because I have to provide a client directive. So let's first of all use this to see this. And notice it actually says you don't have any because nothing has a client directive. So it's telling me ahead of time, I need to add this. So let's do client load is fine. That means it'll load right away. And now I can increment this just fine. And if I come over here, I now can inspect this right here. So notice as I come over the top of this, it tells me all the props that are in, including the client directive that I'm using. Now, obviously I have one file here, so this is not super helpful. It's the only thing on the page, but you can see how if you've got a bunch of these, it'd be really helpful to see like what's being passed in here, what are the client directives, and if I want to, I can just click right here and it'll open the file automatically. Okay, so let's come back over here, and we've also got this audit feature. Now, we've already seen it in use, but just notice here that they're saying, hey, this doesn't replace other tools. It's just like a small help. So it just catches common issues, but you still probably want to run it through something more robust. And then finally, let's look at some of the settings right over here. So if I come over this way and we click on settings, you'll see that we get a bunch of different options. Like you can decide where it's placed. You can decide how verbose you want the logging to be if you want notifications, and you can even hide the toolbar altogether right here. Now we'll look at that in a second. So if I come down here, you can see that you can hide it per project. So if I just do this in my Astro config right here, I can disable the toolbar. And if I come back over this way, it's gone. All right, I can come over here and do true as well if I want to, I think. There we go. All right, down that way. Or you can see that you can also disable it per user. So this will disable it for me, and this will disable it for every project on my machine. And over this way, you can see how you can re-enable it as well. Now up top here, you might remember that you can extend the dev toolbar. And I thought that would open me to the integrations directory, but it didn't, but this one did. And you see I've got the dev toolbar selected. Now here are a couple ones that are already set up and ready to go. There aren't that many yet. You can actually build your own if you want to, or as people build these in the community, you can install these and use them. So for instance, here you can see Lighthouse scores directly reflected on the page. Here would be your dev tool breakdown points. Here you can install a dev tool breakpoints. And this one allows you to look at content collections and schemas directly in your browser. So just for an example of how one of these work, you install it and then it adds a little extra button here down below. And you can click it and it will show you whatever readout is necessary for that extension. Once again, I either have or plan to do videos on these integrations on my channel for free, so feel free to check those out. Well, that brings us to the end of section 2. And in the next section, we're going to build out 3 bigger projects where we put all this into implementation, and you'll actually walk away with 3 projects you can use in the course. I'll see you there.